Good evening, everybody. My name is Mel V, and this is Conscious Consumer Network coming to you live this Wednesday evening. It is 9 p.m. I beg your pardon. We moved the show forward by 2 hours, so that would make it 7 p.m. GMT, 8 p.m. here in Central Europe. So hello and welcome to you wherever you may be in the world, and thank you for tuning in. Tonight is an episode of Dragonology as we plow deep into Season 3 with lots of interesting information. We sure have it all laid out for you tonight. In episode 2 of season 3 of Dragonology, we're going to be looking at one more piece of the puzzle into how our language is constructed and why. At the end of this episode, we connect all the themes to last week's episode and decipher yet another important piece of the draconian construct. So let's start at the very beginning and build just a little bit more. For those of you who are familiar with the Dragonology body of work in totality, you'll have an understanding that we go deep into what is known as etymology. And the Greek word etymos, which is the root word of etymology, the Greek word etymos means true or truth. So that which is true. So in order to establish what a word really means, you need to look at the etymology of the word. That is the history of the word, where it comes from. Because our language didn't just arrive on our planet yesterday. It has evolved from multiple layers of symbolic allegory built up over time, all to have created languages which, although seeming on the surface to perhaps be an expression of one thing, perhaps at a different point in time or even in a different language, it means something completely different. And it actually does make an interesting study to have a look at how everything relates. So we're going to be starting at the very beginning. As I said, the very good place to start would be at the beginning of the alphabet. And this, of course, is not new to anybody who has looked at the work or has read the book. The letter A, of course, being the first letter of the alphabet. The alphabet, obviously, named after the letters alpha and beta, the first two letters of the alphabet. And let's look at the word alpha. Okay, the capitalized form of the letter A is obviously written like this with a belt across the side, the middle. And alpha is made up of two very key dragon root words. And I do want to address them because we're going to be getting into this quite a bit tonight. The L and the Fa come up quite a bit. So the AL, which is here in the dark red, is the Arabic root L and transliterates into the Hebrew root L and the Latin root il. So L as in electricity, or il as in Illuminati. Okay. Now the Fa, the Fe, or the PHA of alpha, this part over here is in purple. And this root word we dealt with quite a lot last week when we spoke about the god Phanes. And obviously PHA is the first few letters of the word Phane, which of course then can move into the word phantom, insinuates the word phantom, because it also has that PHA, PHN root, which we're going to go on quite a bit tonight, have a look at the PHANT root, which comes up in some interesting places. And of course, from Phanes you get Pan, the god Pan, and then pain, as in to feel pain or create pain, and then the word pair, as in a pair of shoes, followed by the fruit pear, which of course is P-E-A-R, and then fear. Now, of course, because the PH makes phonetically the same sound as the F, it's easy to see how the P transliterates into the F sound. So from pear, we get fear. And then, of course, from Phanes, we get Fey. The PHA here is Fey, and we got Fey over here, which is also fair, and fairy, like, you know, little fairies with wings, Tinkerbell kind of thing. And then, of course, we have the word, you know, Tinkerbell fairy is very phonetically similar to the other kind of fairy, which is the boat kind of fairy. You know, you catch ferry from Dover to Calais, for example. And then, of course, the word fury, which is etymologically cognizant with this particular group of root words. From the word fame, we also get the word fan, fame, fable and fantasy. Of course, all the derivatives of that, such as fantastic and, you know, you can take it quite a bit further. But those are the words that can be derived from the PHA, PHAN root word. Now we're going to go on to have a look at the symbolic representative of the letter A, which should be very familiar to those of you who are familiar with the study of Dragonology. The letter A, for those who don't know, is in fact a symbolic representation of this, which is the all-seeing eye. And on top of the pyramid, this particular representation appears on the back of the $1 bill. We're going to be talking about profit and change and money and all that kind of thing today. So it's interesting that this symbol actually turns up on the back of the $1 bill, because everything always ties into each other. As we explore Dragonology, you'll see how that is so more and more. But what is interesting to note is that this has 13 levels. If you count them all, these bricks, it comes in 13 levels, 13 layers. And this is a pyramid with an all-seeing eye raised capstone, and that is what this is meant to represent. The empty part of the A space, so not the part where the black goes, but the empty part is meant to represent the base of the pyramid, and the triangle within the A is meant to represent the all-seeing eye in the capstone of the pyramid, which is actually lifted, raised from the pyramid. So you can see that empty space corresponds with where the belt of the A goes. So that is what the A of the alphabet is representative of. It's not just a letter, the first letter of the alphabet. That's when you say, what is A? You say that to people. They go, oh, it's the first letter of the alphabet. Okay, yeah, but it is so much more than that. There's a much deeper symbolic allegory people need to take into account when looking at the individual letters of the alphabet. And it's so important to understand that it's not just about the phonetic qualities, e, u, and the assonance or the alliteration or the way we pronounce it. Yes, of course, it has huge amounts to do with the way in which the vibrational frequency of the sound is portrayed. But we need to also understand that from symbolic perspective. Going back many, many, many years, thousands of years, the letter A actually has a very deep symbolic correspondence, and we'll go on to explain why. I've been watching a bit of Klaus Donner this week, and this is one of his lectures. He actually talks about out-of-place artifacts, artifacts that he believes come from an Atlantean type culture. So this is one of the interesting artifacts that he apparently found. This was found by Dr. Elias Sotomayor in 1984 in ancient mining tunnels of Ecuador. And it has an ancient writing on it, like at the base of this. As you can see, it is a pyramid, again, pyramid shape with 13 layers, just like the $1 bill. It's got 13 layers on, with an all-seeing eye, or an eye symbol carved into the capstone. And what's interesting, when you put a black light on it, the eye actually glows. Very interesting. But at the base of this, so underneath here, what you've got is, looks like insets of some metal, which this would be Orion, the constant, the belt of Orion, the 3 stars of Orion, which correspond with the pyramids of Giza. And then, of course, over here, you've got this writing. And this writing actually is the kind of writing which is so old, it's an unknown language, but you find it all over the world on these out-of-place artifacts. And what this is telling us is that at one stage, there was a universal writing, and a universal language, which was belonging to a pre-Diluvian, that's a pre-flood civilization. And many people think of the height of the pre-flood civilizations. They think of places such as Atlantis, which is supposedly had very advanced technology and went into the water during the floods. And these are artifacts, and there's numerous of them that have come from this period of time with this very strange pre-Diluvian writing that seems to be universal and found in many different places all over the world on these very old artifacts. And what is even more interesting is that in pre-Diluvian times, or perhaps even in Atlantis, this symbol, the symbol of the pyramid with the 13 levels and the all-seeing eye, is hugely significant. all right, it turns up again and again. And I do recommend you go check out the research by Klaus Donner, where he actually shows how many of these all-seeing eyes in a pyramid he has found that are just thousands of years old. You know, we now think that, you know, oh, we find on the back of the $1 bill, you know, we don't recognize just how significant this symbol is and how far back it goes, and that this is actually a symbol that comes from a culture that is pre-flood, okay, a lost culture. And somehow, although most of this culture was lost, this symbol has translated through. It's come through, and it's still very significant in our present times and used very widely. You'll find that often. The all-seeing eye in the triangle in the Roman Catholic Church, as I said, you'll find on the back of the $1 bill, and other places of interest to do with secret societies and the dark agenda. Of course, the alphabet made up of 26 individual symbols or lexicons, each of them having deep symbolic significance. I have, of course, in my book gone on to describe some of the more symbolic letters, but let's just touch on a few. Obviously, we've just cleared off what A represents. The O is very significant. I talk about this representing the Ouroboros. We've also got a significant one in the letter S, which is the serpent letter, and actually is shaped like a serpent. It looks like a serpent. And then the letter W, which looks like waves on top of the ocean, and actually the letter W was originally the Egyptian symbol for water. So it's interesting to take that into account when you look at the alphabet, because it gives it that much more depth, and it makes you understand that, you know, kind of where these letters have come from and how they've carried through. And of course, this is the Roman alphabet. Most of these letters you'll find in the Latin language, and then of course all the languages that evolved from Latin pretty much use the same basic alphabet. The building blocks of the matrix is in fact the alphabet, and this is what we need to understand. The individual lexicons and symbols that make up our written and spoken words themselves have significant symbolic representations, masking a much deeper allegory. Certain combinations, I beg your pardon, certain combinations of these symbols actually create spells. So, you know, you put C-A-B together, you got cab, or B-A-T together, you got bat. So when you combine certain letters and syllables, okay, letters obviously make up syllables, syllables make up words, words make up sentences, and sentences are constructed in a grammatically correct format. And the process of learning to read and write is commonly referenced in school as learning to spell, or you do a spelling test where they see, you know, they see if you put the letters in the right place so that it equals the right word, and that then you know your spelling, you know, you have learned how to spell. And it's very interesting they use the word spell, because we are in fact casting spells with our words. That's what words are. They are spells. They have an actual effect on the environment around you because of the energetic vibrational frequency encoded into our language. We'll get into that a bit more. All sound and words have specific vibrational frequency. The higher the frequency, the more beneficial it is to our state of being. Low vibration words, emotions, and thoughts attract likewise low vibrational frequencies, and of course then create dark realities. You know, people attract negative people to them because they themselves are really negative. And that's the way it works. In fact, I saw a very accurate demonstration of this when we had the opportunity to meet the Japanese scientist, Dr. Masaru Emoto. And although his presentation was done in Japanese with the help of his wife who was translating, I think it was his wife at least who was translating, he showed us when he tapped a few tuning forks. He tapped one tuning fork and it was making a noise and vibrating. And the tuning fork that was attuned to the exact same frequency standing next to it also started vibrating without being tapped, showing that vibrational frequency seeks out like vibrational frequency and thus affects it. So this is an interesting little demonstration over here, and I want to go through some of this. For example, words such as shame register 20 in terms of vibrational frequency. and I'm not sure what the scaling of this, if it's, you know, feelings per moment or whatever it is. I'm not sure what the measurement is, but in comparison to others, it looks quite an interesting chart. For example, shame, guilt, and apathy are on the lowest. And you've got grief at 75, fear at 100, because fear is still a pretty strong emotion. Desire, going up with anger, pride, courage, neutrality, see neutrality above courage, willingness, acceptance, reason, love, joy. Yeah, we need lots of joy in our life to raise our vibrational frequencies. Peace, compassion, and of course enlightenment. And it says here, all is energy, thoughts and emotions too. We vibrate on a certain level, and the reason we need to look at this now is the vibration in which our earth is vibrating. We need to adjust our level in order to feel good in the very near future. It is also important to be aware of our vibrations when creating our reality, whether it be about health, wealth, or joy. This is about the law of attraction. High awareness is the place to be if you want to focus your time and energy on this work with yourself. So this is a very, I think, useful piece in terms of establishing the basics. You know, I think a lot of people who follow this information know that there's a lot of benefit to keeping yourself in a higher vibrational frequency. You keep yourself healthier, mentally you're healthier. It just works on many different levels. And certainly sound and words have specific vibrational frequencies which affect us physiologically, which affect our environment around us, which affect the people around us, which affects our communities and our day in, day out interactions. So it's very important that we are very aware of the vibrational frequency of words and the quality that we are emitting with the words that we are using. So as I mentioned earlier, in order to create a word, we are taught how to spell, and then we're taught to construct those words into longer sequences, which are called sentences. Interesting, sentence. You know, we're sentencing ourselves to death, for example, with the use of the words that we use. But that is how we're taught to do it. We're taught to spell, and then we're taught to construct sentences in a specific way, and the way in which we are taught is through the rules of English grammar. That's very interesting. You know, you talk about grammar school, things have to be grammatically correct. So English grammar plays a big, important part in the way in which we construct our sentences. And it's important to understand that the way in which we construct our words and our thoughts also determines the way we speak, and the way in which we use our words and process our reality also determines how we think. So understanding the way in which you constructed our sentences almost tells you a little bit about the sort of underlying program of the matrix into which we are programmed without a sort of real conscious knowledge. But these are the building blocks. For example, the letter A, just you say A, is used prior to a word starting with a consonant. Okay, the letter and, for example, the word and is used prior to a word starting with a vowel. I'll give you an example of this. I beg your pardon. I'd say, for example, a man bought an apple. A dog bit a ball, because A is next to ball and B is a consonant. So you kind of get how that works. There are specific rules for specific ways in applying letters, and I'll go on to explain a few more of those rules right now. I'm going to be looking at the letters G, D, and J and how they tie into each other. I have gone on to explain this in kind of one aspect in previous Dragonologies, but there's so much more to understand here. Firstly, the letter G commonly turns up in the Freemasonic symbol and in Freemasonic art. Here's an example of Freemasonic art over here, and the square and compass usually has the Masonic G, and there's usually a depiction, again, of an all-seeing eye, perhaps not inside a triangle, but over here this looks pretty triangular in shape, but you always find these kind of things together, similar themes as we discussed, that always come back on each other. So the letter G, commonly found in Freemasonry, And why the letter G is significant is because the letter G is made up of the letter DJ. It wasn't always G. Let me explain this to you. The letter G didn't really exist. It actually doesn't exist in certain languages, just as J doesn't exist in certain languages. But when you combine the D and the J together, you get a G shape. You can kind of see this is a small letter G. You know, the small letter D goes kind of backwards like that, but the tummy doesn't go forward. So here what you've got is a small letter D with the tummy, and then the back of the J, which would theoretically come down here. And some Gs actually do have a tail like the J. They would have a piece down here. And that is very indicative of the fact that the letter G is actually made up of the DJ, the J sound, the J sound that we get, phonetic sound of J. So that is kind of where we're going with the G, and I want to go on to explain this a bit more, because the G being made up of the DJ, the phonetic sound DJ is represented in Egyptian hieroglyphics as the cobra at rest, okay, which is this symbol here. That represents the DJ in English phonetic sounds. That is what this symbol over here, it's a J. It is the DJ. So this theory is actually the serpent at rest, the cobra at rest is actually what is represented by the G. Okay, just so you can get an idea of where we're going with this. So the J sound is represented as in Egyptian hieroglyphics as the cobra at rest. And where you find the DJ turning up, for example, is in the word jinn, which is an Arabic or Islamic classification for a demon or an angel. And of course, jinn over time dropped the G and it became commonly spelled with a J, so I-double-N. And then over time, it also got changed into the G version. You got the genie. The genie originated from the jinn, you know, genie in Aladdin's lamp. That genie is just an extension of the jinn. And then, of course, you get gene as in genetics and generation and origin and dragon. And this all comes from the jinn root word. Now, we also get something called the Jed column, which is very interesting. I've dealt with this a lot because we deal with columns extensively in symbolism of dragonology. The Jed column is basically supposedly linked to the mythology of Osiris. And the Jed is one of the more ancient and commonly found symbols in Egyptian mythology. It's a column-like symbol depicted in hieroglyphics, and it's commonly associated with the creator gods. Again, creator gods, we dealt with this last week. Creator gods, Ptah and Osiris, and who are the Egyptian gods of afterlife, the underworld, and the dead. It is commonly understood to represent the spine of Osiris. There's a story about the coffin being stuck inside the pillar and Isis pulling up the coffin, and you get a lot of this kind of cutting off of the penis, taking of the heart kind of thing, which ties into Egyptian mythology. And again, it's related to this kind of mythology, this Jed column. So let's have a look at the DJG again, as we've already spoken about, and have a look at where they turn up in our languages and why they're significant. So we've already dealt with the A and the an, all right? Now we're going to add the next letter, which is going to be one of the D, J, or G. So we've got and, which for example would turn up in the name Andrew. Okay, now these letters would theoretically be interchangeable with each other. Okay. So A and D as in Andrew, A and J as in Anjou, and the proof that the J can transliterate into the G is provable in the fact that the Counts of Anjou were known as the Angevin dynasty, or the kings and queens of Anjou, who actually spawned the current royals in place on the throne of England. So Angers in France is where you got the royalty of Anjou, and then the Angevin dynasty, and it's got the A-N-G-E as an angel, like angel over here. Okay, so the J transliterates to the G, and then of course let's start with this root. This is the one we're the most common with, which would be the root word A-N-G, angel, Anglo, and anger. We're going to go there right now. As I said earlier, we're talking about how we use and, for example. The letter and is very significant. as well. Just let's talk about how it's used. We talk about the letter and, we talk about I want a bit of this and some of that. It's a linking word, just like the letter an. It's a linking word. It doesn't really have a purpose or a meaning. It's just kind of there. I want an apple, please. That would say just a, if it was, for example, I want a bread roll, please. The and only happens when it's next to a consonant. Now, we've spoken about in previous Dragonologies the letter A and how it's similar to the, because you normally have a or the at the beginning of a sentence. And both a and the are words that reference the dragon or God. And the next step would, of course, be an, which is much like a, or we get the next step, which is an, which would be a replacement of a when we have the presence of a consonant. And then, of course, the next step, which is the joining word, and, as we've already discussed here, okay, which would be one of the three letters we discussed earlier, D, J, G, and is another very common joining word, which just seems to have no purpose. Much like the, and, they're all kind of just not really definable. I mean, if you looked up the meaning of these words, there wouldn't really be any. They just have a purpose. They serve a function in the formation of sentences in English grammar. Really what these words are doing is they're marking a much deeper allegory, a much deeper symbolic allegory, which is intricately interwoven into the fabric of our language without us even being aware of it. I mean, think about it. What are the purpose of these words? They've got no function. They're just there to join sentences together according to the rules of grammar, which are made up by somebody else, those people who probably created the spelling that we are to use as well. Interesting. So let's go for this now. A-N-G. A-N-G is the root word, obviously, of angel. And in angel, we've got two very common root words, as already discussed, A-N-G in purple and E-L in the dark red. The L, of course, being the Hebrew root word of ill, and, of course, the Arabic version of ill and L is A-L, as we discussed, as an alphabet, okay? And the word angel comes from the Latin words anguium or angui, which are both Latin words referencing the serpent. Interesting that. So here we go. Angel in Dutch is written as engel, right, with an E. And this is, again, you can see this transliteration of the A into the E in the word Anglo and England, all right? Because England, the word England came from Anglo. Another example of how the E and the A transliterates is the word English in English is started with an E, and the word English in French, being Anglaise, is started with an A. Again, an example of how the E and A transliterate with each other. Now, the words anguish and anger obviously start to go into the negative, dark, low vibrational, emotional frequencies, both containing first anguish, which contains the A-N-G, and I just want to skip back here for a moment because the word, we have angui, okay, is anguish without the H on the end. Angui is a word for serpent. You put an H on the end and you've got anguish, all right? Beg your pardon, but anguish. And then, of course, anguish and anger are very closely related to each other, very low, dark vibrational frequency, negatively polarized emotions. And then the word messenger, because this is, have a look at this. This is the A-N-G-E, the root of angel, A-N-G-E, is an anger, okay? Then we transliterate the A out, you have messenger. And what are angels said to be? The messengers of the gods. So that's where the word messenger comes from. It actually has an angel root word in it over here. And then, of course, danger, also a very negative, emotionally polarized word, much like anguish, anger, and danger. They make sense of those words together. Oh, that guy's, there's a lot of anger coming from that guy. I feel a great deal of anguish. Perhaps I'm in danger. You know, it makes sense that all of these are associated with each other. And then, of course, manger, which I just love this because we'll go on to explain why manger is significant in a moment. And of course, Jesus was supposedly born and put into a manger. And of course, that has the A-N-G-E, the angel root word in it as well. And then, of course, we've got change, which has the A-N-G-E, angel root word in there. But also the word changeling actually has the full word angel in it, A-N-G-E-L, right? Change and changeling. And we dealt with changelings last week. So this is the theme that we're going to be carrying on a bit with more as we go through this week's Dragonology. And you can absolutely see how our language deconstructs and where the root words come from and how that influences and impacts the actual meaning of the words. And we can see where these words were used in historical context, in mythology, and it gives it much more understanding. Oh, the messenger of God. Okay, well, that makes sense. It's got an angel root word because angels were the messengers of God. Ah, all right, there we go. So you just got to play with the words and decode them to understand what's being referenced here. And whenever we're referencing angels, we are always referencing dragons. And talking about angels, this lovely picture over here, I think it's a 14th century depiction of the angel Gabriel. And Gabriel, you can always tell Gabriel why, because he's always depicted in green and sometimes with splashes of red or the red cloak. But Gabriel is commonly depicted as the green angel. Okay, so let's talk about the manger. Right? The manger is an important symbolic allegory. Why was Jesus put into a manger? Why do I make such a big deal about Jesus was born and then put into a manger? This comes up so much. Now, the manger is a very symbolically significant allegory. We spoke about last week how Moses was put into a basket of reeds and floated down the river. We talked about the orphans and all of that allegory. Well, it's the same thing. Jesus was put into a basket, which is what a manger is. It's kind of, if you look at this picture, it looks a bit like a basket, right? Same as Moses. So Moses was put into a basket. Jesus was put into a manger. Now, again, the basket or the vessel that can float down the river is similar to a boat or a ferry. We've dealt with ferry as well, pertaining to the fanes root word, okay? And manger as well, containing a baby, much like the basket did, ties into this group of root words and themes, all right? The ferry being a boat or a ship. And the word ship is indicative of contract or law, all right? Think about Admiralty maritime law when we start looking at how the law works and how it's very much linked to the laws of the oceans. And this becomes very evident when you look at words like kingship, relationship. The word ship being a symbolic allegory of boat or ferry or manger or basket. All those themes are indicative of yet another symbolic layer, being that of contract and covenant, okay? And we'll get into contract and covenant as we go through this, so remember that. But what is interesting to notice is that the manger is a symbolic allegory which has the same exact reference, being a reference to the dragon bloodline. And yeah, Jesus was of the dragon bloodline. You know that because he was from an immaculate conception. Immaculate comes from the word iaculus, which is also a Latin word for serpent. So manger is indicative of the fact that Jesus was of a dragon bloodline, as was the fact that Moses was put into a basket. That is indicative of the fact that he's of the dragon bloodline. And much like boats and ferries are indicative of the dragon bloodline, ferry, of course, etymologically cognizant with fanes and fairies and fury, as we discussed, we go on to the symbol of the ark, which turns up in the story of Noah, because guess what? Noah was also of the dragon bloodline. Let's have a look over here. In religion, okay, we're going on to covenant. In religion, a covenant is a formal alliance or agreement made by God with the religious community or with humanity in general. It is central to the Abrahamic religions. And the Abrahamic religions, of course, are all the religions that recognize Abraham as the first prophet. And of course, that would be Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Now, prophets are important. We spoke about prophets last week. So anything that recognizes Abraham as the first prophet is considered Abrahamic religion, which again proves that all these religions come from a common origin. The Islamic people wouldn't be very happy if we had to say that to them. All Abrahamic religions consider biblical covenants important. Okay, so Judaism, Christianity, and Islam consider biblical covenants as important. This picture over here, I love this picture. It's the picture of Noah's Thanksgiving offering by Joseph Anton. Beg your pardon, thanks offering, not Thanksgiving. It's Noah's thanks offering by Joseph Anton Koch. And this particular picture shows Noah builds an altar to God after being delivered from the flood. And God sends a rainbow as a sign of his covenant. Okay, now rainbow and covenant. I'll cover that theme off a bit more. Very important. Rainbow is the symbol of the covenant from God. Okay. Now, again, Noah was associated to the ark, as we've said. So the fact that Noah is also associated with the covenant is not surprising, because the ark, the manger, the basket, the ship, the ferry are all indicative of contract and covenant. I hope everyone gets, it's kind of so many different elements to this, but it all ties into each other. So let's have a look at this rainbow symbol. As we said here, that the rainbow was sent as a sign of God's covenant. Okay, the rainbow symbolism. Rainbow symbolism turns up so much in Dragonology. You can't ignore it, so let's explore it. This is a picture of Queen Elizabeth I, and it's a beautiful artwork, and it's actually not decided as to who painted it. There's a couple of people who have been accredited with this artwork, but whoever painted it obviously must have been somehow initiated into a secret society and endowed with deep occult knowledge, because there is so much symbolic allegory hidden in this particular picture. It's a beauty to decode. Okay. First off, let's start with the rainbow portrait of Queen Elizabeth I. All right. Things to notice over here. She has a serpent embroidered onto her sleeve. All right. The serpent with an apple in the mouth. What else you'll notice all over this beautiful garment is eyes and ears. Okay. Not like on faces, just loose fitting. Like one eye there, one ear there, one ear there, one eye there, eyes and ears all over this garment. And of course, Queen Elizabeth I seems to be holding a rainbow, which of course is a physically impossible. Normally, no one can actually hold in a rainbow because it is a visual illusion. It's not something you can tangibly touch. Trust me, I've tried many times. A rainbow just keeps eluding me. But the rainbow is being held in this picture by Queen Elizabeth. And the inscription, which is on the left over here, says, non sin sol iris, pardon my language, but my Latin. But what this means is no rainbow without sunshine. Very significant. No rainbow means no covenant without the sun. No rainbow without sun. Now, what is the sun symbolic of? Yes, it's symbolic of God, because sun gods, etc. But it's also symbolic of the dragon, as we discussed last week. The sun and the dragon and the serpent are inextricably linked, often commonly depicted together, particularly in Egyptian mythology and religions. So what this is saying, no rainbow without sun, it's saying no covenant without God. There's no promise without the dragon. Okay, no contract without the dragon. In other words, without the dragon, we would be free. We would not be subject to the covenant or the contract. All right, and we'll get onto that in a moment. No rainbow without the sun. So without the dragons, the royalty would have no control over us. Without the gods, the people who are running the show wouldn't be there, because they are appointed by the gods. That's what the divine right is all about. And I'll get onto that as well. Look at this closer over here for a minute. Here we go, the symbol of the serpent, lovely twirlies. This is such incredible artwork over here, because it's actually an embroidered image on the arm decked with pearls and rubies and all sorts, but it's actually a painting. So there's a huge amount of skill that's gone into depicting this garment. And of course, looks to be holding an apple in his mouth. Very significant. But over here, very important to notice, of course, you've got on the garment a very clear depiction of an eye and a piece of an ear you can see over here. I'll just pop back here. You can see how the ears and the eyes are all over the garment. And of course, here is that serpent. Yeah, very significant. We talk about eyes and ears quite a lot. We get onto ears quite a bit. We've covered off what the eye means quite a bit in previous Dragonologies. Of course, it appears in the triangle, often above a pyramid. Let's talk about the rainbow serpent, because as I say, the theme of the rainbow comes up so much with relation to dragonology and mythology. And of course, you find the rainbow serpent turning out somewhere to do with the creational god, and he turns up in Australia. The creator god of the Australian originals, some people reference them as the Aboriginals. I like to be politically correct and reference them as the original peoples of Australia. They have amazing mythology and dreamtime stories and often involve the creator god, rainbow serpent or rainbow snake. And rainbow snake is commonly depicted in the artwork of the Australian natives, the originals, very common theme. So it's not hidden. Please go research this for yourself. There is a creator primordial dragon god called the rainbow serpent, and it appears in Australian or original mythology. Now we go back to the covenant again. What is the covenant? We've been talking a lot about this covenant, okay? No rainbow without the sun. The rainbow is a sign of the covenant, okay? And what is the covenant? Contract and covenant are the same. What is the contract and covenant? We'll get into that a bit. But I just wanted to go back there so you can understand where we're going with this. Covenant, all right? An example of the covenant that we spoke about is the divine right of kings, okay? Divine right of kings. That's not if, it's meant to say of, I beg your pardon. The divine right of kings, or it's also known as God's mandate, is a political and religious doctrine of royals and political legitimacy. It asserts that a monarch is subject to no earthly authority, deriving the right to rule directly from the will of God. The king is thus not subject to the will of his people, the aristocracy, or any other estate or the realm. It implies that only God can judge an unjust king, and that any attempt to depose, dethrone, or restrict his powers runs contrary to the will of God and may constitute a sacrilegious act. It is often expressed in the phrase, by the grace of God, attached to the titles of a reigning monarch. So we've talked about this before. How do we have these people who control everything? They say they're there because they've been appointed by God. They're there by the divine right. And I love this particular picture because it's a picture of Charles I of England with the divine hand moving his crown. It's a late 17th century picture. You can actually see the crown being removed or placed onto his head by the divine hand. You can see a bit of an aura going out there. But that's an interesting analogy, like you are chosen to be the ruler of the people by God. It's by divine mandate, so to speak. And this, in fact, is indicated by several previous well-known rulers. For example, in ancient Rome, the title divus, meaning godlike, was given to Julius Caesar by the Senate, declaring him a god posthumously. Okay, he claimed relation from both Venus and Mars. His great nephew, who became the emperor of Rome, also adopted the term divi filius as his name. Okay, so divi, divine, divi obviously being the root word of divine, from which we get other words such as deva, deity, day, and divination. And just to give you an example of this, we spoke about the sun earlier. Louis XIV, that horrendous man, there's a lot of history to do with Louis XIV that I really, really dislike. This is the guy who, after all the years of wars of religious intolerance, and we managed to get something called the Edict of Nantes in France, which granted Protestant Calvinists relative freedom in France after the religious wars, and allowed them to work and own property alongside French Catholics. This is the guy, Louis XIV, who decided to revoke the Edict of Nantes and basically started again a long reign of persecution and just utter intolerance of Protestant Calvinists. And a huge amount of them, known as the Huguenots, actually left France at the time and settled in various other colonies, America, South Africa, and I'm in fact descended from the Huguenots. So This is why this is a particularly significant point of history for me. And this particular guy here, Louis XIV of France, is known as the Sun King because he was also, supposed to be a god. He wanted to be divine, like the sun. We talk about sun gods, and even on his clothing, you have an anthropomorphized sun, the sun face. We've spoken about this before in Dragonology. That's a symbol of a sun god. So he was the Sun King. Even look, sun rays coming off his head. And it's interesting to notice that he's got curly ones alongside straight ones because that's the typical hallmark of the Jesuit symbolic sun. But anyway, as we have here with the Roman rulers putting divi or divus before their names, here you have Louis XIV depicting himself godlike, like a sun god, a sun king in his artworks. That's because they believed that they were chosen by God to rule. An example of this in the Bible is under something known as the covenant of salt. And I've gotten into the salt symbolism quite a bit in season 2. Please do go back and watch. Very interesting, the covenant of salt. And of course, from the second book of Chronicles, chapter 13, verse 5, it says, "Don't you know that the Lord, the God of Israel, has given kingship of Israel to David and his descendants forever by a covenant of salt?" So basically saying that the descendants of David of Israel are to rule over the people of Israel, and this covenant is given to them by God. Okay, again, a contract, a royal mandate, a godly mandate, an order, a contract, a covenant, all the same thing. Now, what's interesting to notice here, and I will go into this because I found this and stuck it in. I'm not sure if this is the appropriate time to put it into the presentation, but I could not resist because, of course, there's been a lot of speculation about whether or not the royals are in fact dragons or not, rulers and leaders of the world, shape-shifting dragons. In fact, there are so many people nowadays who claim to have seen our present Queen Elizabeth II shapeshift into a dragon that is becoming kind of hard to ignore. It's not just the likes of conspiracy themed people such as Arizona Wilder, Mother Goddess, who attended many rituals and presided over many ceremonies attended by the Queen where she actually shapeshifted. But we've got famous people too coming out saying that Queen Elizabeth II is in fact a shape-shifting reptilian or dragon, including Vladimir Putin, Prime Minister or President of Russia, leader of the Russian state, and of course, Lady Gaga. Interesting that. And this was actually placed onto the royal website. Last year, it was in June or July 2016. And I had to laugh because this was up only for a few hours and a few people got some screenshots and then it was taken down. They said it was a mistake by a junior palace IT staffer. But I just love this. It says, "The Queen has ruled for longer than any other monarch in British history, becoming a much loved and respected figure across the globe. Her extraordinary reign has seen her travel more widely than any other monarch, undertaking many historical overseas visits. Known for her sense of duty and her devotion to a life of service, she has been an important figurehead for the UK and the Commonwealth during times of enormous social change. Earlier this week, the Queen was seen by thousands of people in a form they are not acquainted with. We seek to reassure the public that the Queen is still their Queen and remains the respected and loved figure they have always known. While she may not be human, she is a devoted leader and monarch, and she believes her subjects will grow to accept her and her family for what they are." Now, this is obviously a quote from her. She says, "I pay tribute to the commitment and selfless devotion and generosity of spirit shown by my millions of human subjects, and I fully expect them to digest this news in a mature and humble fashion. Nothing has changed. Together we shall march on." Right, okay then. Well, let's have a look at this. Could you imagine? You're standing in a crowd and suddenly this woman who you think is the Queen shapeshifts into a 7-foot reptilian. Hang on a second. This is the problem they're having now. There's a lot of news coming in by the people that we know saying that the reptilians who are in human form are struggling to maintain their human form, and they're shifting, they're flipping between states, and sometimes they're unable to control it. It's becoming more and more difficult for them. And we've been hearing this for some time now. And this is obviously what happened because clearly, the Queen was at an event and seen by thousands in a form that they're not acquainted with. What the fuck does that mean? Excuse my language, but like, you know, if you weren't familiar with the reptilian agenda, what would you think was going on here? Especially when they follow it up with the sentence, we seek to reassure the public that the Queen is still their Queen and remain, she's still their Queen because she appeared in a form that they weren't familiar with. You know, alarm bells ringing a little bit. This sentence says it all, but you got to love the gentle way in which this is put across. The Queen is still your Queen, even though she's shape-shifting dragons and drinks human blood and eats babies. She's still your Queen, should still be respected. Oh, yes. Anyway, I'm not going to take the piss out of the Queen anymore, but you get what I'm saying. It's being placed on the royal website by her own staff. Yeah? Come on, people. Okay, so the Queen can shapeshift. The evidence has appeared on her own website stating that this may be the case. So let's look at the concept of shapeshifting, because it's usually been thought of when we see examples of shapeshifting. It's normally been in relation to, you know, Disney stories or superhero stories, Marvel or cartoons. You know, it's normally thought of as a superhuman ability. And we spoke about this last week, superheroes or heroes, which are, you know, just another version of, which were the original, in pantheism, the heroes evolved when pantheism turned to monotheism. Heroes evolved into prophets, okay? So now we need to look at some of the themes that have been associated with heroes that have been put right in front of our faces in cartoons and Disney films, the ability to change shape or shape shift, okay? Now, we might think that this is just, you know, things in storybooks and fantasy stories and on movies, but one need only look at our language to see how the concept of shape-shifting has been absolutely interwoven and encoded into our language. And shape-shifting is a very specific thing. It's not something we see every day. I mean, if you saw someone in front of you shape-shift into a 7-foot dragon, you'd go, whoa, that was a shapeshift. And, you know, probably you've never seen one before. And most people probably haven't, because most people don't have the ability to shapeshift, not that they know of. It's supposedly a superhuman quality attributed to superheroes. What is interesting, though, is when you look at the words associated with the supposed quality of changing shape, you know, from one form to another. For example, changeling. Right? The word changeling actually has the word angel in it, as we already discussed. We spoke about changelings last week in Dragonology, but the word changeling has two very clear dragon root words in it, be it A-N-G, okay, and the E-L. Here's another one, morph or metamorphosis. It's got a very clear dragon root word of orph, all right? The Orphic mysteries, for example, the Orphics for people who worship the serpent gods. Orph, as in morph, okay? And of course, changeling, as in change, to change shape. To metamorph, talk about how I first came across the word metamorphosis when we learned about what happens to butterflies and cocoons, how they go through a metamorphosis from a caterpillar, and they emerge as a butterfly after the metamorphosis. Metamorphosis meaning they're changed in shape, they're shape shift, they're shifted from one shape to another, with the dragon root word in there. And of course, if you want to put Isis on the end too, you know, just a second dragon root word there too. And then of course, theophania, the meaning God, as in you study theology, or theosophy or thelema. The reason the is in those words is because it is the root word for God, meaning God. In the Greek language, if you say theoi, that's just T-H-E-O-I, you're referencing many gods. It's a plural. So the references the gods or the dragons. So does Fane reference the gods or the dragons, as we've already discussed. And you hear about a theophany or theophania. A theophany is supposedly the sudden appearance or disappearance of a god, deity, dragon, whatever you want to call it, god stroke deity stroke dragon, That is what a theophany is. So also the ability to change shape, because if you can suddenly be there and then suddenly disappear, you bet you're changing shape, okay? So theophany, the sudden appearance or disappearance of God. Very interesting that you've got so many root words, dragon root words, encoded into words associated with the concept of being able to physically change your form, be it a shapeshift or an appearance and disappearance into thin air. These words are there and they clearly indicate that the concept of shapeshifting and form changing is a very old concept, and it's always been there, and it's always been inextricably linked with dragons. We just have to look into our language to decode and decipher this deception for ourselves. Now here is a very interesting piece of rock art. The Sorcerer of Chauvet and Troyes in France. Now, what I find quite a lot is many examples of rock art show themes of shape-shifting. Okay, this is said to be a shape-shifting, toes of a man, legs of a man with looks to be the upper head of a bull or a stag or a steer, something with horns. And of course, dragons are always typically represented with horns. Think of the god Pan, the goat god Pan. This looks to be something that's changing shape from a human form into an animal form, or from human into dragon and then back into human again, or in the midst of a shapeshift. And one of the most commonly found depictions I've found in ancient rock art is people, when they see a shapeshift, they want to draw it. It is one of the most commonly depicted concepts that I've come across is the concept of shapeshifting, depicted in ancient rock art in one form or another. That's very interesting because, you know, the biggest collection of rock art in the world, 4,500 pictures, as you say, biggest concentration is actually at a place in Southern Africa, in Botswana, in Sodilo Hills. And these hills also have the oldest dragon or serpent ritual worship site on Earth. It's supposed to be 70,000 years old. So it's interesting that rock art, one of the oldest forms of pictorial depictions, being able to actually pick something up with your hand and make a symbolic representation. What do we find? We normally find a depiction of something shape-shifting. Lots of these shape-shifting type pictures come up all over the show in ancient rock arts, represented by ancient cultures, obviously because they were trying to tell us something. They were trying to leave behind clues for us as to what is really going on in our reality. And this is probably one of the easiest ways to do it, you know, shape-shifting queen, or, you know, controlling us all, eating us, destroying us, whatever. This is how they do it. Of course, we're talking a little bit about superheroes. I went into them last week, and I go into superheroes a bit in my book. But the whole concept of the superheroes is that they have supposed abilities that human beings don't have, which is why I keep saying that these superheroes that get depicted in film, in comic books, in Marvel movies, in whichever entertainment blockbuster they want to put out, they're normally, what these heroes are normally symbolic representations of the dragon. And you can find many deeper allegories of that. Of course, when you go in to look at the whole concept of the orphan, how many of the superheroes are orphan, like Batman and Superman, and what orphans mean. Of course, you've got Batman and Superman standing right next to each other there. And of course, what it means, the word or and fan, orphan, the fact they don't have parents, is actually symbolically referencing the fact that they're from dragon bloodlines. Their parents were dragons. And yeah, this is the whole why we've got so much iconoclastic idolatry. Yeah, let's have superheroes and let's worship them. Let's put a lot of energy and hope into them. Oh, we want to be like Superman. It's because it's the same as, you know, let's idolize Jesus. Let's idolize something that represents a dragon, a golden calf. It's the same thing. It's iconoclastic idolatry. And what they're doing is masking the dragon behind, you know, sanitized, child-friendly images that they can get us to inadvertently pay our attention and energetic currency into, therefore worshipping and adoring the dragon. I did speak earlier a bit about the prophet, and of course, as pagan pantheism turned to monotheism, the archetype of the hero evolved into the prophet. The concept of the hero and the prophet are exactly the same. And the word prophet, of course, contains the dragon root word ophi, And the homonym of prophet is prophet. It's the same word, prophet and prophet, but they're spelled differently. One, of course, referencing a prophet, someone who's got a message from God, for example. And the other one's referencing profit, as in, you make profit in a business. That's a monetary thing, which, of course, again, is indicative of the divine covenant of sacrifice, submission, and contract. And I'll get a bit more into that as well. But first, I want to deal with fanes and fan, because this is very interesting. This is new territory for those who have been following Dragonology, so pay close attention. Of course, we spoke about fanes and the root word fan, which turns up in phantom, and has the dragon root word fan, and the slight extended version fant, which of course turns up in elephant. And elephant, of course, has a second dragon root word being L, which transliterates into ill, as an Illuminati in the Latin, and AL in the Arabic equivalent as an alphabet. Now, why the elephant is significant and why the use of the elephant? Okay, this is obviously Ganesha, Hindu religion and mythology. I want to point out a few things about the Hindu Ganesha, because it's very important to take notice of this. Firstly, when you look at the face of Ganesha, what you notice is it's actually a very human face, depicted with very human eyes and eyebrows like a human being. I've never seen an elephant with eyebrows. So what they're doing is a very human face with obviously trunks and tusks. Again, this is symbolic of shape-shifting, of the therianthropic quality which we talk about when we talk about Dragonology, of these dragons being able to shape-shift or change into any form, particularly human, but not specifically human. There's legends of them turning into other animal forms as well. But what this is showing you here is this is definitely a human mixed with an elephant, and they've got multiple arms. So it's not even a real creature. This is some kind, you can see it's representing a deity, deified creature. But most certainly with anthropomorphized features, being humanized features, tied in with these elephant features. Now, I'm going to go on to explain why Ganesha is so symbolic, and it's actually so simple when you see why they use the elephant god as a representation of the dragon. So the dragon-elephant symbolic correspondence. First off, horns, wings, and feathers are symbolically associated with the dragon. All right, so of course, the tusks of the elephant is symbolic of the horns, okay, and the ears of the elephant are symbolic of wings. All right, and I'll go on to explain that a bit more. Okay, and wings are made of feathers. You've got the feathered serpent, and for example, in Southern American mythology, and of course, the trunk of the elephant is symbolic of the serpent. Doesn't that look like a serpent to you? Well, of course it does. That's what it's symbolic of. And of course, the serpent mixed with humanized features. Those are very human eyes. Okay, so let's go on to look at how the ears are actually of a deeper symbolic allegory. First, have a look at these images of Ganesha. Here's two different sculptures of Ganesha. And you'll see in this one, he actually has a serpent tied around his waist. And over here, you see another one of Ganesha with a serpent crawling over him. So again, serpent symbolism inextricably linked with the elephant god Ganesha in Hindu mythology. And I want to talk about the ears, for example. The elephant ears are normally very big and greatly enlarged. And they are actually representative of wings. And this enlargement of the ears is actually represented in other Hindu and Buddhist type god figures. For example, in Hindu mythology, here we got Avran depicted with oversized ears again, and tusks like or fangs. And again, fang, F-A-N-G, the A-N-G, dragon root word, okay, as an angel. And Yama as well, with oversized ears and fangs. Okay, fangs, tusks, horns, they're all associated with each other. Of course, Buddha is also depicted with oversized ears. You're probably wondering what's with the oversized ears. The oversized ears actually represent wings, all right? The kind of wings that you see depicted on the head of Hermes. And this looks like, you know, for example, ears to you on the side of Medusa, because that's wings. That's a typical depiction of Medusa with serpents for hair. And of course, Medusa was a Gorgon, another dragon representation in Greek mythology. Have a look at that. The wings over there, which would be in place, which would actually, what these are meant to represent are wings, the big ears. The oversized ears represent wings. That is what they're there for. Okay, that's what why we use the elephant head is because the oversized ears represent wings, which are clearly demonstrated in Greek mythology. For example, here's Hermes, not only with wings on his head, but wings on the feet. He was serpentipedis, dragon-footed, and of course holding the caduceus, which also features wings and twirling serpents. So here you've got Medusa with the serpents around her head, Hermes with the caduceus, twirling serpents, and the winged staff. And of course, the ears are actually oversized ears are representative of wings, and wings are themselves a symbolic allegory representing the dragon. And if you don't believe me, here's how this is proof, because Dumbo could use his ears to fly. He could use them like wings, okay? And this is where you begin to realize, oh wow, they've encoded this into Disney. Well done, Disney. You can always rely on Walt Disney to mask dragon allegory behind very sanitized, pretty little smiley faces of blue-eyed elephants. It's quite sad. Look how innocent this looks, and yet it's masking a huge amount of dragon symbolism just in this picture. Okay, the oversized ears, of course, which is what made Dumbo able to fly. Dumbo, the flying elephant. So the ears would be in place of wings. And again, I'm going to go back and explain this to you. Dumbo the flying elephant, his ears used in place of wings. Okay, here we go. Wings, where the ears would go, oversized earlobes, which are representations of wings. And you find the oversized earlobes on the various gods, which is why the elephant god Ganesha is used, because he has the big ears, which represent the wings. And of course, the big ears turn up in multiple religions with multiple gods, because they are in fact a symbol of the wings, which you would find typically on a dragon. And this allegory and symbolism is multi-layered on top of each other to bring you Dumbo, the flying elephant, presented by Disney. As we said, Disney has always masked the existence of the dragon behind multi-layered symbolic allegory, which is sanitized in order to manipulate children into the adoration of the dragon, masked behind seemingly innocuous, innocent, blue-eyed themes. Very sad. Okay, now we get a bit dark, because this is the stuff that you kind of go, ooh. Fant, the root word fant, let's deal with that. Of course, we've spoken about the root word fant turns up in elephant, turns up in phantom, turns up in fantasy, turns up in fantastic, infantry, and infant. Okay, now that's interesting. Infant, Infant, the word infant comes from the Latin word infantum, which is etymologically cognizant with phantom, all right? And phantom is interesting. We'll get into a bit of phantom. What is the symbolic significance between, what does phantom actually reference? We'll get into that a bit more. But again, I just want to point out the fact that they've taken yet another cartoon, okay, and stuck it in the faces of teens and children, a sanitized dragon allegory, the phantom. Ooh, it's too obvious. So what is the link between the infant and the dragon? If you were to think of what is the most immediate link between an infant child and a dragon, there's simply only one link, okay? The link between dragon and infant, okay, being the heir, which we spoke about last week, the firstborn, the infant is a sacrificial offering to the dragon. That's it. That is the link between the infant and the dragon. The infant is a sacrificial offering to the dragon. Again, look at these images, okay? This is typical of a woodcut of an offering of children to Baal or Moloch, a dragon god, symbolically referenced or represented sometimes as an owl or a bull. And again here, child sacrifice in ancient ruins depicted, carved in. It was such a huge part of every dragon worshipping culture, child sacrifice, and it still is. It still very much is. Okay, so think about this for just one moment, all right? We've spoken about this. Infant, the fant word is a dragon root word, turning up in the word phantom. And this is very symbolic. The link between the dragon root word fant, okay, it's not there for no reason. What it's saying is this little baby is a meal for a dragon. The word infant is saying that. That's what it's saying. The word infant is saying, referencing a child as dragon food. That's what the word infant really means, dragon food. Now, childhood sacrifice is encoded into language, and this is very sad and very obvious when you look at what the word infant means. The act of child sacrifice to dragon gods is encoded into our language. The very word infant is indicative of child sacrifice, as we have just discovered. And of course, I love this picture by David Dees. He's a friend of the network. We've had him on. Look again, the triangles with the all-seeing eyes in them. These symbols turn up interlinked and interwoven into each other. And of course, in other depictions of human sacrifice from ancient cultures, you commonly find pictures of the plumed or feathered serpent turning up. This is a Mesoamerican depiction of a human sacrifice. The serpent or dragon gods depicted in the background, because of course all sacrifices were done as ritual worship to the gods. Okay, so the word phantom. Let's tackle the word phantom. The word phantom is synonymous with the concepts of ghosts and spirits, which both have multi-layered etymological symbolic allegory masking the dragon. And what's interesting is the word phantom. When you think of phantom, you commonly think of things like Phantom of the Opera. And Phantom of the Opera, when I think of Phantom of the Opera, I think of that white mask, because that's kind of the logo they use for Phantom of the Opera. But the white mask or masks, and you can see in this particular depiction of the phantom, you've got lots of masks kind of floating around. And I'll get into that. We'll finish off on that one. But phantom and masks are inextricably linked and associated with each other. Okay, but for now we're going to deal with the word phantom, which is synonymous with the concept of ghost and spirit. Okay, ghost and spirit, two very important words. First off, let's deal with ghost. The word ghost, of course, apart from having the very significant letter G in front of it, okay, actually has the word host in it. Now, the word host is very important because you find the reference to the Lord of hosts turning up over 200 times in the Bible, the Lord of hosts. So obviously the word ghost has the word host in it, which further invokes the word, not world, the word hostile, right? And with the word hostile is synonymous with words such as anger and fear. Okay, hostile, anger, fear, negatively polarized emotions. Again, anger, fear, hostile, dragon root words. In fact, the Latin word hostis means enemy. And here we go, spirit. All right, spirit. Let's deal with the word spirit. Two dragon root words in here because it's a very significant word. You've got the word spi, S-P-I, and rit. Okay, SPI is the root word of spiero, which is another word for dragon. Spy, spiral, spell, speak, and spend. And all of these concepts are inextricably linked with the dragon. Okay, as we have dealt with in previous dragonologies. Feel free to go and have a look. And of course, the root word rit turns up in rite, as in a sacrificial rite or ritual, or to write with a pen. Ivrit. Ivrit is the Hebrew name for Hebrew. it's what you call Hebrew in Hebrew. You call it Ivrit. Okay, I speak Ivrit means I speak Hebrew with the root word writ in it. Now, what's interesting, I just wanted to point this out because again, I don't know why, it just keeps, every time I go look for, Google the word spirit, and I found this post, and I thought, I'll add that news up with Dragonology, thank you, because guess why? In this picture of spirits, Stallion of the Cimarron, okay, which is DreamWorks, Hollywood entertainment, mind control media machine production, you have obviously Spirit, the name of the stallions, and these are a beautiful animated feature about horses, and that's all very good and nice. You think it's all very good and innocent. And yes, okay, fair enough. Well, let's look at where dragons, horses are significantly mask the dragons in mythology. comes up, for example, in the form of Pegasus. Horses don't have wings. As we said, wings are symbolic of the dragon, as we've just discussed. So the Pegasi, horses with wings, turn up in Greek mythology quite a lot. I'm sure you must be familiar. Pegasus is one of the most commonly depicted sort of horse gods that there are. But they're also the hippocampuses, okay, which the hippocampus, of course, having the forequarters and the heads of horses and the hind legs of, looks like a mermaid or a fish, which of course we've spoken about things like medicine and dragon gods also being ocean gods, oceanids, mermaids, etc. So of course wings and serpent tails or fish tails on the back of horses are again indicative of the dragon. It's a more symbolic allegory of the dragon, these horses are, which is why it's interesting that you have horses turning up with a animated feature under the name spirit, because that is typically two dragon root words, spi and rit. So yeah, very interesting. So just to go back, spirit and ghost, obviously very synonymous with the concept of phantom, but when you actually decode what ghost and spirit are further in terms of decoding the etymology, you see how further allegory pertains to the themes surrounding all the words that tie into these particular root words. Okay. Now, wanting to just get into the covenant and contract a bit, contract and covenant, because we spoke about that quite a bit already. In order to consecrate a covenant or contract, a sacrifice is required. An example of this is, in legalese, we call this consideration, right? For example, a bank gives you a mortgage, you take the mortgage out. Now, there has to be some kind of consideration for that contract to be considered legal. Otherwise, you can actually have that mortgage declared null and void. Most of the time, no consideration takes place. This is why most mortgages are illegal contracts. But generally, there is something called consideration. When you make a contract, there needs to be an exchange. Like, for example, if someone wants to lawfully give me something, but they want it to be done on a contractual basis, they can do it on the basis of giving me $1 or €1, just so that there's some lawful consideration to mark a lawful contract. You know, sometimes people do that. They sell something for $1 under contract, because if you give things away for free, it falls under a whole new legal jurisdiction. It's no longer contract. And contract law is protected under maritime admiralty law, which of course protects all the laws of commerce. So we operate under a covenant and contract which requires sacrifice. And that's why, well, I'll get into that in a minute, but in legalese, we call this consideration. Initially, sacrifice always meant a blood sacrifice, okay? Murdering an innocent child, maybe an animal. But nowadays, we've sanitized it a bit more and made it a bit more socially acceptable, sort of, because now the sacrifices are represented in many other ways. They're hidden behind many other symbolic allegories in the form of hidden votives, which, of course, are masked by symbolic expression. We've dealt with hidden votives before and the symbolic expressions that mask them. I've got a little piece here which deals with the differences between contract and covenant, but I don't want to get into the specifics of that at the moment, but it really does, what you see here is just how similar contract and covenant are, in fact, and that they virtually are one and the same thing. Now, we talk about no covenant or contract can happen without a form of sacrifice. Well, tax is sacrifice. Of course it's sacrifice. Tax is sacrifice. Dragon root words encoded into words relating to contract and covenant and sacrifice are interesting because they too have dragon root words in them, okay? We've spoken about this already. Think of the words that pertain to giving your money or your or exchanging money or spending money or making profit in a business. All these things pertaining to, you know, money, tax, finances. Have a look at them. Profit, for example. The word profit actually has ophi, serpent root word ophi in it, as depicted here. Okay. The word change, as we spoke about, has the ang, dragon root word in it, and spend. Okay. Has the SPE, which comes from the SPI, dragon root word of spiero. So all these words are connected to contract and covenant, the concept of money. You spend money. When you spend money and you spend too much, they give you change. If you perhaps have a business, you run at a profit or you run at a loss. So all of these are very significant that they have dragon root words in them, because they talk about our subjugation, our contract, the covenant, the submission of the slavery of humanity to these serpentine dragon bloodlines that are given divine mandate to rule over us by the supposed dragon gods. I'm going to go into a totally separate theme now, but it's a theme I haven't really dealt with, just to finish off this week's Dragonology. And that is the theme which relates to the multi-headed aspect. And for some reason, this turns up again and again in so many different and varying pictures which actually reference the dragon or are symbolic allegories of the dragon. And it's also, again, it's like shape-shifting. It's not something you see every day. And when you see it, you know you've seen it. Like you would know if you saw a man with two heads. You know, that's a man with two heads. I know that's a very specific thing, which is why it's a very specific thing that it turns up in dragon symbolism. Here we've got a picture of St. Margaret and the dragon. Of course, the dragon depicted with what looks to be two heads. This could be the head of a little puppy or something like that. Here is his head over here of the dragon. And of course, this is an angel, an Arabic depiction of the angel Gabriel, as I said, always depicted with green and sometimes red. But notice, apart from having a head over here, at the end of the wings is another little head. Okay, so again, the two-head, multi-headed aspect always relates to the dragon. One of my favorite paintings. I love this image. Image drawing by Michael Pasha from the 15th century. And so-called church father's altar. This is a Ghent altar. And the outside right wing, lowest scene, actually, you have to close this thing up to see this particular drawing. But it's basically a painting of St. Augustine and the devil. According to other sources, it's St. Wolfgang and the devil. But it was painted by Michael Pasha in the 15th century. And what you notice over here is, again, the dragon stroke angel stroke devil figure, again, horns, fangs, wings. What do we have here? One head, and then what looks to be another head on where his buttocks is, and the mouth where the supposed buttocks hole would be. Very interesting. A set of eyes there, and you can even see a little fang protruding from this open mouth cavity. Anyway, I always use this picture when I'm talking about making a deal with the devil, because it very much looks like this is what this particular picture is referencing. Also, interesting to notice this image of the demon dragon is depicted as green and with cloven hooves. Lots of interesting dragon symbolism encoded into this. And of course, the multi-headed aspect comes up again in other parts of the world and other dragonology mythologies. Here we've got the Naga, which commonly found in Asia. It's one of the things in Thailand with Buddha depicted at the seat of the Naga. And this is, you can see very clearly the Naga tail, which twirls round here and comes up with 7 heads. And you got it again here, the 7-headed Naga, and this is the tail of the Naga being carried by the gods. And this is actually on the causeway of one of the bridges at Angkor. And we spoke about Angkor in great detail in last week's Dragonology, so do go back and watch if you have not seen it already. But again, you've got gods holding the length of the dragon, and here's the 7 heads that come up here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 heads. Okay, got 3 down here, 3 down here, and 1 at the top. And of course, the 7-headed dragon isn't exclusively stuck in Southeast Asia. We find it in Greek mythology as well. Of course, there would be one in Greek mythology. In the mythology of Hercules, where Hercules fights Hydra, the 7-headed dragon, or Hercules slays Hydra, many different depictions. Of course, this is a woodcut, and this one would be from a piece of pottery. So 2 different depictions of that. And of course, the 7-headed dragon comes up in the book of Revelations, interestingly enough. Here we go. Here's one depiction of woodcut, and you notice, again, this is typically the angelic mother goddess depiction. We've got the crown of stars standing on a moon. And here you've got the seven-headed dragon. Here we got two different sets of seven-headed dragons. There's a set over here with 7 heads and a set over here with 7 heads. And then notice this tail goes down again and becomes another head on this side. Yeah, like we've seen with some of the other dragons. They've got tails on the end of their wings, bigger one, faces on the end of their tails, on the end of their wings. So the multi-headed aspect is so typical of Dragonology. It doesn't really turn up in relation to anything else except with dragon-related themes. And of course, the whore of Babylon riding the 7-headed dragon is a common theme as well, carrying supposedly the Holy Grail. Again, the Holy Grail is another theme which masks the dragon bloodline. We've gone into that in a lot of previous Dragonologies, but do have a look at this one. This is one depiction. And this is another lovely depiction because it shows this particular dragon as serpentine in nature with a serpent's tail that splits off into 7 parts as opposed to having 4 legs like in this one. And again, the whore of Babylon holding the cup, which this one seems to have some sort of vapor coming out of it. And of course, the word vapor is etymologically cognizant with viper, a form of serpent. And there seems to be some kind of alchemical depiction over here, symbolic sigil. So interesting to note the multi-headed aspect in so many different contexts, again, all pertaining to various elements of Dragonology. And the many faces or many-headed aspects is very much related to mask symbolism. Okay, the multi-headed dragon theme extends into the concept of many faces, bringing in the concept of masking, masks and masking. And I'm going to leave it there for tonight because we'll pick up on that one next week in episode 3 of Dragonology. So make sure you tune in to see how we go with that one. And if you have missed out on anything, you're welcome to check out the archives available at ccn.media. That is the specially dedicated archive page for all the live broadcasts that go out on Conscious Consumer Network. Also, please do check out Dragonology Seasons 1 and 2. They are available on the Dragonology website. That's dragonology.info. And on that website, you can also find a copy of the book, which I've just completed, launched on the 1st of December 2016. So it's just out, only just over a month. And if anybody's wanting to get a copy of the book, please feel free to download download an ebook copy with a discount code of €5 off, so you can get your copy for €20 as opposed to 25. And the discount code is Dragonology S3. So please, guys, go help yourselves to a copy of my book with a €5 discount. Use the discount code Dragonology S3, S3 standing for Season 3. And of course, you're welcome to check out any of the other broadcasts that go on and are put out on Conscious Consumer Network. The broadcast guide is available on the Conscious Consumer Network website, and all the information and broadcasts that are put out is done so with the intention to educate and inform the public. Please support the CCN funding campaign for 2017. This is a publicly funded network, and we are very much reliant on the public support to keep going. We are not under any official guidelines or controls. We do not receive government funding, and we are not corporately sponsored. This is absolutely a free and independent media network dedicated to the empowerment and freedom of humanity. And again, if you want to find anything to do with us, feel free to check out our website, consciousconsumernetwork.tv. Feel free to write to us at info@consciousconsumernetwork.tv. And all our contacts and various bits of details are available on our website. And that's it for tonight, folks. I'd just like to finish off by thanking you for supporting free and independent media. We'll see you next week with episode 3 of season 3 of Dragonology. It's been great being with you. My name is Mel V, and we will see you again.